When your child has graduated and now they're out of your house, sitting on their bed in their dorm room or apartment, what are the key principles that you pray are driven deep into their soul? Today, I'm going to begin a series that covers the 12 most important principles that will help our children go beyond survival and thrive in a turbulent world. Hey, I'm Jay Holland, and I want to welcome you to Let's Parent on Purpose. This is a podcast for families who want to thrive and not just survive their parenting years. Each week, I'll bring you an insight or an interview that will help strengthen your marriage, parenting, or your walk with Jesus. If you find this podcast helpful, I would ask that you subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also go to letsparentonpurpose.com and search for past topics, as well as get a hold of free resources that I've created to help your family. And one of the exciting things about this upcoming series is that the exact same principles that are going to help your children to thrive are the same ones that you and I need to thrive as well. So as you're learning for them, you're going to be learning for yourself. Hey, this is Jay Holland. I'm so thankful that you're joining me today. Just a couple things before I jump into the content. One is I wanted to tell you about a book that I've been reading. Actually, I read it a couple years ago, and I put it on my reread list this year. And I have to say that I'm shocked that I did, because the title's one of those that would naturally just drive me away, and the fact that it's been pretty popular for a long time would drive me away. But a couple years ago, I think I just had a gift card, and I picked up a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I gotta say that it's really good. In a lot of ways, it just feels like an exposition of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's not written from an explicitly Christian standpoint. I don't know a lot of the history of Dale Carnegie. Maybe I should, but I don't. But he has just some profoundly good principles. This is one of those books that not only would it be helpful for you to read, but it'd be a good one to give if you've got a high school student who's 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. It might be a good one to make them read as well. And it's one of those you don't need to read straight through, because you probably won't get as much out of it. Just take a principle at a time. So I picked up the book a couple years ago, and this time around I picked up the audiobook just because I have more drive time than I have sitting and read time. If you would like a free copy of it, you can do that. If you're not already a subscriber to Audible, you can get one by going to freeaudibletrial.com/Let's Parent on Purpose, and it'll give you a credit, and you can actually download that book for free, or just pick it up on Amazon used for just a few bucks. It's worth your read. How to Win Friends and Influence People. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, I have created a little list that I'm calling my top 5 top 5s. So we are over 150 episodes into Let's Parent on Purpose, and during this time, I've covered a ton of different topics, had some really, really helpful conversations, not just for me, or not just for you, but actually for me as well. I'm learning a ton as I do this, and it's really helpful because I've got kids who are in elementary school, middle school, and high school, actually just finishing up high school this year. So my top 5s, these are my 5 favorite podcasts, or 5 most helpful podcasts on 5 different subject matters. This is marriage, parenting, spiritual life, habits and character formation, and then my personal favorites. And so if you're on my Things for Thursday email list, I'm going to send that out to you as well, so that you don't have to sort through. You can just find them and go to a direct link. And, this might be a little recharge for your marriage, or just some real sharpening for your parenting. If you would like to get it, and you're not already part of that Things for Thursday list, you can text the word THINGS, that's THINGS, to 66866. That's THINGS to 66866. And in addition to the top 5s, I'll also send you my Fun Family Conversations ebook, which will really open up some dialogue between you and your children, whatever age they are, as I give you discussion questions for meal times, drive times, bedtimes, and all kinds of other times. Now, let me go ahead and introduce today's topic. So I've been doing student ministry for 20 years, and over that time, I've really tried to think through the fact that I've got a group of students for a short period of time to pour the same, and so you could go through exposition of the Bible, which is very good, but I realize with most of these students, I don't have students for 7 years. I tend to have students for about 3 years because they move or they come and go. And in addition to that, if I have them 7 years, I've really got 2 or 3 different human beings during this time. A child that you get in sixth grade at 11 years old is not the same person who's entering high school, and they're not the same person who's graduating high school. And so one of the things that I've done over time is just really try to think through what are the most essential principles that I want my children, my personal children, to have, and then by extension, every other student that I get to come in contact with. What are the things that I think will help them bloom the most, thrive the most, not just survive, but if they're going to have a deep-rooted faith and make an impact on the world, what are the principles, what are the core things that I want them to know? And so I've got this huge senior class at my church right now. It's the biggest one that I've ever had. I think we've got 12 to 15 students that are graduating high school this year. And it's an incredible group. It includes my daughter. My heart's sad. I'm thrilled for them, but my heart's sad. But as I've been thinking through this last semester of being with them, what are the things that I want to pour into them, since they are still hooked into church? They're still hooked into not just church, but our youth group as well. And so I basically want to kind of run through what are called my checkpoints, my main checkpoints. And these are principles that I try to teach the students every couple of years at max, because they need to hear it over and over and over again. Because when they leave, I want them to know these things, not just that Jay said these things, but I want them to be things that they know and they own. And the truth is, these are the same principles that you and I need as well. And so today, I'm going to begin a series now with the youth. I'm calling it Thrival Kit, like Survival Kit, but Thrival Kit. I'm not titling the podcast that because I think it will confuse people when they read the title. So, we're talking more about survival skills, but remember, this goes far beyond survival. So with the students, calling it Thrival Kit, Essentials for Enduring the Apocalypse, Transitions, or Tuesdays. Now with us, let's just say these are the survival skills that we need to have and that our students need to have. And so today I'm going to begin with the first one I'm doing with our students. And this isn't necessarily in order of eternal importance, but I think it's in the order of what matters the most to them to get. Like, what are the things that will set them in the right direction? And if you've got a child between 11 and 18 years old, and actually even upper elementary, you're going to realize that friendships become everything to them. And it's not that the parents aren't important, but it's just that friends become so incredibly important. So today, the first skill that we're going to talk about, the first principle, is in the realm of meaningful friendships. And so what I have with all of these, the 12 different ones that I'm going to do, there's a category, like there's a core area. So like today's is meaningful friendships, and then there's a statement that I use over and over again with the students to put this in. And so this is one of those things I want to encourage you to, because I didn't make up most of these. I found them, I copied them, maybe I made up one, but these are, I feel like, some of the most helpful statements outside of God's Word that you can drive into your own life and into your students' life. So let me walk you through the core principle of meaningful friendships, and that's this: our friends determine the direction and quality of our lives. Our friends determine the direction and quality of our lives. If you go to the Bible, Proverbs 13, verse 20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." I love that verse. Whoever walks with the wise will become wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. One of the things that I tell our students often, and it's fun because a couple of the ones that are older really get this and they repeat it now, is that you become basically a composite of the 5 to 7 people that you spend the most time with. And so, if you're wondering who you're becoming, you should really look around and see who are the people that I'm spending the most time with, because I start to act like them, I start to talk like them, I start to like the same things they like, I start to dress like them. And so sometimes it's healthy to step back, get some perspective, and realize, do I like the composite of who they're becoming? Because that's who I'm becoming. What about you? Do you realize and get that your friends determine the direction and quality of your lives? If you have found a church community that is vibrant, that is encouraging, that's digging into the word, that really supports people as they're walking through things, that can light your life on fire. But if you're in an area where you're isolated, if you're in a place where you just don't have those kind of spiritual friendships, you realize how lonely it can be. And so one of the things that we want to do with our children is to continually instill in them, hey, your friends determine the direction and quality of your lives. It's one of the things, we just did a bunch of surveys in our student ministry, and I realized that honestly, most of the kids don't read their Bible. Most of them pray sometimes. Most of them read their Bible a month at a time or less, once a month or less. And I wish that wasn't the case. Maybe I'm just being transparent that I'm a horrible youth pastor, but I remember being a vibrant kid in youth, supposedly vibrant kid in youth ministry, and I wasn't much different. I didn't spend a ton of time reading my Bible, but I was still spiritually growing a lot of times, and it seems odd that can be the case, but you think about it, for the first 1,600 years or so of church people existence, of Christian existence, people didn't have copies of the scripture. Books didn't begin to be printed until the Gutenberg press, and even then, it would have been the extremely wealthy that had them. So what makes the difference? The spiritual community that you're in, the church body that you're a part of, hearing God's word preached to you in truth, and then who are the people around you that are going to put you towards that? So as we talk to our kids, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. And that is a great biblical backing for the principle, our friends determine the direction and quality of our lives. So what I'm going to do with the students, and what I want to do with you right now, is I want to give you some warning signs of the kind of person that you want to avoid, and then also a positive example of the kind of person that you want to be and the kind of person you want to surround yourself with. And so I used two different acronyms here, and one of them actually did an entire podcast on a summer ago called Mad Gas. So the acronym is MADGAS, MADGAS, and these are the kind of people that you want to avoid. Now, I got all of these from the book of Proverbs, verse 20, not necessarily in order, but if you want to go back and do your own personal research on it, Proverbs 20 is a phenomenal chapter for warning signs of the kind of people to avoid. So I'm not going to go into all of those verses right now for the sake of time, but if you want to go back and recheck them, check out Proverbs chapter 20, and you'll find these people in there. So mad gas, this is what I want to use to train my children, because mad gas is toxic. Mad gas reminds us that these are toxic friendships, toxic relationships. And so what does the acronym stand for? Well, first off, M is for the manipulator. The manipulator is the person who's always trying to get you to do what you don't want to do. They're guilting you. They're shaming you. They're using the social pressure around you to do things that you shouldn't do, to do things that you don't want to do. They work through embarrassment, shame, pressure, maybe even fear. And the manipulator can ruin your life. Actually, any of these at all can ruin your life. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to be careful that we're not being manipulators to our children, that we're not guilting and shaming them into obedience, but also helping them to understand what it means to be a manipulator, so that they can even use that word. I think vocabulary is very important. And so understanding to be able to, you need to know what it means to manipulate in order to be able to identify it. So the first toxic friendship is the manipulator. Second is the addict. If you have had somebody in your family who's an addict, you realize that addiction destroys humanity. Addiction destroys people who might have been caring, loving, generous, have a hard work ethic, all of these things. And with addiction, people become incredibly self-centered, and others just become commodities to them. Now, obviously, we could be talking about drug addiction. We could be talking about alcohol addiction. And, that's one of the things that we want to have continual wise conversations with our children about is very early and repetitively, not just talk about substance abuse in terms of sin, but really in terms of the wreckage and the carnage that happens. I've got a family member that from a young age, I was able to watch go down this path of destruction with substance abuse. And it was the greatest lesson to me. Like, drugs had zero temptation on me because I saw what the addict did to the rest of our family. And so helping our students realize that, it can include pornography, sometimes just even the addiction to devices and stuff like that. Obviously, maybe not as upfront wrecking as drugs and alcohol. But we want to be careful of addictive personalities. We want to be careful of people that are so addicted to their thing that the human beings around them start to lower in value. So we've got the manipulator, the addict. Number 3, D, is the deceiver. The deceiver is a liar, and one of the things that I try to point out to my children is, hey, if your friends will lie along with you, if they'll lie to other people, then they're going to be lying to you. If your friends will lie to their parents to get out of stuff, then they're going to lie to you. And a deceiver, like, they're just not trustworthy. One of I think it was an Andy Stanley podcast with him and his wife, and he said they only had 2 rules in their house. The first was honor mom, and the second was don't lie, because lying breaks relationships. And I love that. When we talk about lying, obviously it's a sin. Lying, deception, half-truths, these are sinful. But what do? They break relationship. And so helping our children understand, the deceiver is just crushing relationships everywhere they go. We want to avoid these people because we're going to get crushed one day. Speaking of getting crushed, the next one is G. So mad. Now we're on G for gas. G is the gossip. The gossip is the one who, in order for them to look up, they're tearing everybody else down. They, as soon as somebody goes out of the room, they're cutting into them. And I think this is one of those that should be obvious, but it's not. But helping coach our children that if somebody will gossip with you, they will gossip about you. Now, as moms and dads, we need to be really careful as well, because we have to have these conversations with our kids, but we need to make sure that we are not walking in hypocrisy where our children see us gossiping about those around, where we're really nice and friendly to their face, and then as soon as they're gone, if we're in the privacy of our home, we're tearing them down and lashing into them. Gossips will get you, and I think that's one of those that, like, unfortunately, we in the faith tend to gravitate towards, and it's sad. Gossip is about pride. Gossip is it's a grossly insecure pride, though, because a gossip can't stand on their own 2 feet. They have to cut everybody else down so that they feel like they stand up. All right, we got 2 more. MAD, G, A. The letter A stands for the arguer. The arguer is just a drain. They've got to be right all of the time. And, teaching our children that you can be right, you can win an argument and lose a battle. And the arguer is more concerned with appearing right, with more concerned with getting their way all the time than they are the people around them. This is just toxic. It will wear you down and beat you down. So these are people to avoid, and they're people to avoid being. And then finally, the slug. Now, this is one I think that's much harder for kids to care about. And I know that can be one if your child gets old enough to where they're in dating age. It can become terrifying to you for a couple of reasons. Like, as your kids get older to go out of the house, like, you can get terrified of their tendencies to be a slug. But also, if they have their eyes set on somebody who has a poor work ethic, it can be terrifying. But the slug just sits around, loafs around, and waits for everybody else to do everything, waits for everybody else to serve them. And, they might be funny, they might be humorous, but after a while you realize, man, you're carrying the load in this relationship. Now, I want to say something before we move on to the positive ones. Your children don't have the option of completely avoiding all of these people. Why? Because they're surrounded by a bunch of little sinful humans, and they're a little sinful human, and they're being parented by a grown-up sinful human. So we have these tendencies, but we want to be aware of them. We want to call them out. We want to be able to identify them, and we want to walk cautiously with these people. And I think it's also important to recognize the difference sometimes, like if we're talking about a deceiver, recognize the difference between a lie of convenience or circumstance versus people that just delight in lying for the sake of lying. I think that in general, humans are guilty of lying to avoid embarrassing situations, lying to avoid getting in trouble, lying to avoid getting caught. And our kids are going to do that. And sadly, we do that more than what we would like to admit. But there's a whole nother realm of person who just seems to delight in making up things. And I can think of childhood friends that I had that were like this, that it's like, man, why are you even saying that? It's obviously not true. And now you're going to argue and fight over it. But I do want to just say, we want to warn our kids about this, but sometimes there aren't a whole lot of high quality people around. This can be especially the case if you're in a small school or if you're in a new environment, or there's just not a big friend group, or truthfully, if you're in middle school altogether. And sometimes it's the case if you're in some of these really big high schools, like the high schools around here, most of them are a few thousand people. And so there's probably wonderful people involved in each of those schools. But, if you're in the same classes with the same people, you're a little bit stuck. So we don't want to demoralize our children of saying that everybody's terrible and you can't be around them. But we want their radars up, because we want them to realize their friends do determine the direction and quality of their life. And so just like mad gas will kill you, I want to teach my children that jetpacks will launch you. A jetpack, you strap them to their back and they take you to places that you could never be before. They lift you above the circumstance. The Mandalorian just came out, the Disney Plus show, The Mandalorian, and I love it. And it was really cool. One of the episodes, you see all these Mandalorians flying around with their jetpacks on their back. And man, it's 2020. Don't you think it's time that jetpacks were common? I feel like when I was a little kid, the most natural thing in the world, we were going to have vacuum tubes like the Jetsons, and we were going to have jetpacks to get to where we needed to be. But let's go through jetpack real fast. We don't have to go into as much detail about these, but these are the character qualities that I want to be and that I want to look for in friendships. First, J, I want to look for somebody who's joyful. Not that they're happy all the time, not that they're fake, but that I see that there's a deep joy inside them. And truthfully, the people that I know that are joyful, it's because of the Lord. The joy of the Lord is their strength. Number 2, an encourager. So the opposite of the gossip, the opposite of the deceiver, the opposite of the arguer is an encourager. This is a person who knows how to actually speak compliments about other people, true things to lift them up, and they delight in helping other people feel better about themselves. And so, one of my goals for this year is I want to be an encourager. And you know what? It's a spiritual gift, but at the same time, it's commanded of us. It's like generosity. There's people who have the gift of generosity, but also you're supposed to give. And in the same way, I can speak highly and then ask God to fill my spirit with the joy and gift to do it more and more. So joyful, E, encourager, T, trustworthy. I want to be around trustworthy people. I want to know that when my friend is around me, I can trust them. And when my friend is not around me, I can trust them. When your children start getting into dating relationships and we start talking about purity and moral boundaries, this is one of those that I think is a good conversation to have with them in and before is, hey, if that person can't be trusted to hold the moral standards with you, what makes you think that they're going to be trusted to keep their moral standards when you're not around? And that goes into marriage as well. I think if you can hold that purity as you go into marriage and you can fight those temptations, it gives you a lot of groundwork of trust when you were in your marriage, when you can say, I know this person fought for purity with me while we were dating, and so I can trust them much more. Now, most of our kids, they don't care about the marriage those examples aren't going to mean as much to them. But trustworthy, does your word mean what it says? Peacemaker. So Jet, joyful, encourager, trustworthy. Next is a peacemaker. Now, a peacemaker is not the same thing as a peacekeeper, because sometimes a peacekeeper will put things under the rug instead of bringing them out. But a peacemaker is one that pursues peace, pursues right relationships, tries to right wrong, is willing to have the hard conversations to get over that part of a relationship. It was really profound. I heard my daughter teach in Baltimore last year, and she talked about the realization that she had lived most of her life as a peacekeeper and wanted to be a peacemaker. And I thought it was incredibly profound. And I want to ask you, are you a peacemaker or are you a peacekeeper? God hasn't called us to just keep the peace. We are it's blessed are the peacemakers. Those will be called the sons of God. The next A for active. The opposite of the slug. For me, even in youth ministry, I can bridle a moving horse a lot more than I can raise a dead body. And so I like industrious, to praise the industry of our children and their friends, and to realize as well, they're going to be industrious over the things that we like. And so don't necessarily just critique all of the video game stuff, because there's some incredibly creative, high-skilled stuff going on in some of that. But also, I want them to move. I want them to work. So an active friend is going to be an incredibly helpful friend. Then the last two, C and K. C is for Christ-centered, and then K is for kingdom-minded. We want to find friends that their core values are the things of Jesus, and their core bent in life is to be a blessing to God and to other people. When I think about these, a good biblical example that comes up to me is Barnabas. Barnabas was joyful. He was an encourager. What a trustworthy guy. He was a peacemaker. He was active, Christ-centered, kingdom-minded. And, what an incredible character study that you might do with your children as you're trying to talk to them about the kind of friend to be, as well as the kind of friend that they want to seek. You want to remind them, you become like the 5 to 7 people that you spend the most time with. And so perhaps as you're walking through this, as you're talking to them about mad gas and toxic friendships, and realizing that they become like the 5 to 7 people that they spend the most time with, well, what do you do if I find that I'm in too many toxic relationships? And so 2 responses that I want to give. First is diversify. And this might be for you too, not just for your children. If you realize, as I'm going through this, that you're surrounded by too many toxic friendships, the first is diversify. Start spending some time with different people. You don't have to be around the same people all the time. As you're an adult, think outside the box. Think outside of your age group. Find people that bring value to the relationship, regardless if they look like you or they're in the same demographic. And with your kids as well, encourage them to diversify. It doesn't mean that they have to drop all of their friends, but make time and effort, and then you help them to do that. You help arrange get-togethers and play dates and stuff like that if they're younger, for that to happen. So diversify is number 1. Dilute is number 2. So you can encourage them to add new people to your existing groups. If you realize that your friendship maybe it's because you're around the same people for too much of the time. And, I've had it before where it's like, when I was growing up, if the 3 of us got together, it was bad. But if you added 2 more people, it changed the whole dynamic, and we were pretty okay. And so encourage them. You can diversify or you can dilute. Instead of it just being those few toxic people, bring others into that group. And that can be a strategy. So ultimately, we want to be the kind of friend that you want. You want to be the kind of friend that you want. And if you can do that, you begin to attract those kind of people. I remember hearing a long time ago, to catch a prize, you got to be a prize. And it's true. And so we want to be the kind of friend that we want others to be to us. Hey, your children are going to go through a myriad of friendships. They're going to have best friends now that they never speak to again this time next year. And there's going to be people that are not even in their life right now that by a year from now, they'll feel like they were inseparable. They're going to go through seasons of loneliness. I just had a breakfast with all of my graduating seniors, and I asked them to look back at their 6th grade year and and ask what was going on in your mind. And 2 of the main words were insecurity and loneliness. Every single one of them raised their hand that they were insecure and that they were lonely. These 11-year-old girls mostly, and a couple 11-year-old boys. And they thought that everybody else had it together and had a ton of friends. So they're going to go through those times. In those times, it's time to encourage them in the Lord. It's time to spend personal good time with them. And also remind them it's not always going to be like that. And as you seek to be the kind of friend you want, you begin to attract the kind of friends that you need. Hey, I hope this has been helpful for you, not just as you coach your kids, but also as you think about your own life. You can get some of these principles in the show notes at letsparentonpurpose.com, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can just scroll down and get those show notes. I've put some of these main principles in there, and I just want to encourage you. You have so much influence. Your friends determine the direction and quality of your life, but mom and dad have more weight than anybody else in the life of a child. So don't give up the raising of your kids and the shaping of their character to their friends. Help shepherd and guide them, and you just might find out that you like the people that they're hanging around, that they're spending time with, and ultimately that they might give or take the last name of one day. Friend, thanks so much for listening today. I pray it's been a blessing to you, and if it has, please share this episode with somebody that you care about. If God lays it on your heart, I'd love for you to consider joining our Patreon support community. You can find out about that by going to letsparentonpurpose.com. Finally, if you've got a topic that you'd like to hear me address, send me an email at jay@letsparentonpurpose.com or give me a shout on the Let's Parent on Purpose Facebook page. Hey, please never forget that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint, and that you need a good church family to thrive through all of the different challenges that you're going to face. Keep pointing each other to Jesus and enjoy the gift of life that God's giving you today. Hey, whatever season you're in, it won't always be this way, so set your hope on Christ and not your circumstances. Have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you soon.